Sackbot Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleklutz.
And today we are doing another part of our exploration of art and how it relates to video games.
So yeah, this is Art 2, Episode 2.
Yeah, I guess we could call it that.
Yeah.
This is gonna be the final part in this series for now.
We may talk about art again at some later date, but for right now, this is what we had hoped to accomplish. This is rounding it all up on an artsy note.
Yeah, and if you'd like to see the episodes that came before this, go ahead and click on the upper corner of the YouTube video, or find a link in the description if you're on Spotify.
Okay.
There are other episodes you can, watch and or listen to them, and hopefully enjoy them.
Yeah, that's the idea. So today we're actually going to finally get to talking about video games as art. Video games that have moved us, that we feel are elevated, but not necessarily our favorite games. They might be. I'm not speaking for anybody. All I know is the game I'm talking about when I get that far is not my favorite game. It's not even my favorite art game, but it is an example that I didn't want to give a full episode to about a game that has elevation to it, and we're going to talk in just a second about what we mean by that. If you listen to our last episode, this will be kind of a recap for you.
Yeah, starting off, we define art as a creation that was made deliberately by a human or group of humans. We don't currently have an understanding enough to determine things created by other creatures.
And we're not including AI in this. So our definition of the whole umbrella of art is just all of creation by human beings. Whether or not any of those things are art beyond that is up for interpretation or whatever. You can argue whatever you want to, but everything qualifies for possibly being art under that particular umbrella. From that point, though, what we're talking about when we're talking about video games as art and what people are thinking of when there's art. And I don't want to be classist, elitist, or too heady with any of this, but there has to be something that elevates it. It has to have something that was put in it, for communication, or it has to try and say something, or it has to evoke emotions beyond just one surface.
Sure, this makes me sad. Is there a reason it makes me sad? Or this makes me sad and happy. How dare!
And video games in specific have a lot of different possible layers that they could use to make, the art parts, right? So just a few I have listed in my notes here are world building, story, aesthetics, music, innovation, mechanics, and then in a box is themes, because themes are usually a way that these layers can be tied together to give deeper resonance for whatever message is trying to be conveyed by the piece. And in this case, we're actually talking about games.
Finally! A gaming podcast about games!
Thank you for putting up with us this far to get here.
We did it. It's time for video games again.
Oh, come on. The Roger Ebert episode actually had a lot to do with video games.
It did.
So,
do you want to talk about an example of higher art in video game format, Sackbot?
So I want to talk about something that I find has some artistic elevation to it. So here's the best example I got. Well, I don't know if it's the best example. It's subjective anyway.
Don't worry so hard, kid. Nobody's asking for the definitive guide on art. Here's just something you wanted to talk about that fits criteria.
I don't know, I can say it's the best example because it's the one I most wanted to put in this episode. Haha, gotcha.
You did. Look at me, I'm God.
So I'm gonna talk about art in a video game, and of course that means I'm going to be discussing Sonic the Hedgehog. Specifically, Sonic the Hedgehog CD, which, to address a previous statement, this is, in fact, my favorite video game, just entirely. Okay, so I know what you're probably thinking. We all know Sonic the Hedgehog. He's that cartoonish, spiky blue thing that, is apparently a hedgehog, though, I wouldn't blame you if you're not too convinced, and he fights this guy with a mustache who builds robots.
Don't we all?
But yeah, a take I've heard about, just kind of all the sort of, original run 16-bit pixely Sonic games from the 90s was, that kind of at least had some, undertones about environmentalism. The idea of this hedgehog, this animal guy, fighting this human dude who's turning everything into robots. But usually it's just the undertone. Sonic CD, on the other hand, it is about that. Not just in its, story or narrative, but has mechanics that tie directly into it. It's a game about time travel. And, not just time travel as a device or something that's just like a cutscene. It's, an active mechanic that you use throughout the game. What this does is, so, Robotnik, his role in the thing is to kind of be a sort of an ambitious industrialist. He sees the natural world sees wasted potential in all of it. And you actually get to see how that plays out. He goes back to the past and starts setting up stuff back there, so it's already got stuff going on in the present most of the time, and, when you go into the future, it's an absolute nightmare.
So the game shows how industrialization could have caused changes over time?
It's how if you let that ambition to just, keep building and building and use every last resource that nature has to offer you, you're not going to end up going anywhere good. And I think the thing that I think makes its environmental message powerful is, it's a, this reoccurring theme where it's like, in natural environments, they become this sort of, mechanical wasteland. You get into more urban and industrial areas, they're falling apart. And in Robotnik's lair, the last level of the game, the bad future, you don't stop him, even there is in ruin. It's like the soundtrack, at least the one and the Japanese version, because there's two soundtracks, actually, but one of them, it's like, it has like an actual lyric component where he is literally making fun of you. It is this, literally has this diss track, and by the way, it's a banger, but...
This sounds like Sonic.
But yeah, it's this kind of thing where, he's won. He's gotten everything he's wanted. You see what becomes of his ambition over time, this absolute monolith of what he hoped to achieve. And he's just mocking you, completely unaware or accepting of the fact that everything he's built is crumbling to dust in his hands.
That's a pretty powerful message. I mean, it's a lot more depth than I suspected in a Sonic game. And when did this come out?
This was 1993.
Wow, yeah. That's like way before people were giving video games the credit that they're due.
Right.
This kind of thoughtfulness.
But I've always contended, as soon as I ever heard about the debate of whether or not video games are art, I'm like, video games have always been an art medium. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Just...
So anyway, to take a deeper dive into, the final zone, Metallic Madness, the stage Robotnik's lair, it's like when you see it in the past, it is already this big construction site. Already a distinctly man-made structure as far as the eye can see that already has Robotnik's face plastered on it. It's like, this is absolutely the heart of his operation. It is the manifestation of all his goals right there in one place. Something interesting happens like when you make a good future places. It's true in all of them, but it's also important here is that it's like you'd think, well, if it's about trying to stop humanity from meddling with nature, then surely it's gonna be about taking all the man-made stuff out, watching nature reclaim everything. But that's just the thing, it isn't. Yeah, you start seeing things like having tons of little wild animals and, plants and stuff just all happening alongside this, science fantasy tech.
So it's a more, permaculture. It's a more permaculture future, where humans and nature integrate themselves into a more symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the end of WALL-E, that kind of a future, where none of it's bad, necessarily. It just all needs to be tuned. Everything needs to be aligned for peace, and not for destruction, for growth, for plants and animals existing in their own right just as much as human beings, But, tech can absolutely be a part of that.
So,
Not to sidetrack what you're talking about.
It's like you see things like the water level turns into what appears to be some kind of treatment facility using kelp of some sort. It's nice, clean facility that, it's got tons of fish in it, living their best life. So yeah, you see tons of instances of that, and yeah, to get back to the final level, when you get the good future in that one, they turn Robotnik's lair into a giant chrome planter box, and it is thriving.
Nice.
It's
very nice.
Dense forest all around, rooftop gardens all over the place, and yeah, the metallic elements that remain are in as good a condition as ever. Technology is right there holding its ground, but it's like when it's not being let loose to take over everything, there's still space for it.
So what kind of emotions do you feel when you even think about this?
Well, a lot of the imagery you see in this game doesn't necessarily, it's nothing mind-blowing on its own, but just the implications of some of the stuff you see, particularly at the end of the game, is just find it kind of awe-inspiring. It's just a surprisingly nuanced take on, how much is humanity pushing our boundaries and overextending our reach.
Without paying any attention to the thriving that needs to happen with non-human creatures in order for the planet we need to survive also.
Yeah, and also kind of, just because, nature needs to exist does not mean the things that we've made are not allowed to exist. It's not an either or, it's not a zero sum.
Yeah, we're all for non-zero sums. So is there more that you want to talk about right now about the art of Sonic CD? The art, not, and I don't want you to take that as just the aesthetics, because it's not. They used aesthetics and the soundtrack and the mechanics and the world building all to tell this story, right?
Yeah.
And probably among other things, too. I haven't played it. This is just what I've taken from what I've heard Sackbot talk about.
It's as I've kind of alluded to, it's this game sets up, Robotnik as a villain better than, pretty much any other, just because you actually get to see what he does. Since he has a whole timeline to play with, you get to see points where Sonic wasn't there to stop it. And yeah, thinking about the soundtrack, well, I guess kind of the themes of the levels is that the Robotnik's influence and the level of technology gradually increases from area to area, just across time. That's true in sort of, the environments and the level aesthetics, but yeah, it holds true for the music as well, and it's in that final level when you get to the good future, it's it takes a lot of the bad future instruments and turns them on its head. It's great.
Sounds like it. If you could see Sackbot's face, very animated. There's a lot of love here, and that's why I love art. It's because that's what it does. Is it tickles your brain, and it stimulates things by connecting across layers.
Yeah, and if you want to hear Sackbot talk even more about Sonic CD, he does go over some of it in our soundtrack episode, so go check that one out too if you're interested.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And, I'm sure I can rustle up hours more material about it in the future.
This is not the last you've heard of Sackbot talking about Sonic CD. Absolutely not. Alright. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beaming over there.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all smiling.
So, how about we talk about one of my favorite game series then?
Alright.
It's a game series that I love so much that, part of it is in my online handle that I've been using for over a decade now, I'm going to be talking about Pokemon, specifically Pokemon Black. Not Pokemon Black and White, Pokemon Black, and I'll get into why later.
That's why it is Pokemon Black specifically, not Pokemon Y.
Oh, goodness.
I hate that you're the one who made this joke and not me.
Oh.
I mean, joking honestly wasn't even the point.
No,
it's a genuine clarification I have to make.
That is true.
It's having lived with I won't call you a diehard Pokemon fan because I don't want them to come at you, ever, for any reason. I don't need diehard fans of anything to come at any of us. I don't want to deal with that kind of energy. I want to say long time high energy Pokemon enthusiast, especially for the video games over the card games, and we have done some of both. Especially around Black. That's around the time when I was a gym leader, just so I could help out with the Pokemon League that you joined. So it's we have some boots on the ground experience and long relationship with Pokemon, but, you know.
Yeah, and for those of you who do not know much about the Pokemon franchise, I'm going to lay just a little bit of groundwork here, which is that, as you know, it's about pitting two creatures in combat against each other. This is like a pretty simplified way of looking at it, because how you obtain these Pokemon is you go into the grass and they approach you. This is considered to be them approaching you specifically to prove themselves to be trained, to be caught and used by Pokemon trainers to get them to be stronger, because as they grow stronger, they get new forms, they evolve, and this would be a form that would have a better survival rate in the wild.
So, Pokemon lore, I'm just clarifying for myself and the audience. So Pokemon lore says that Pokemon want to train with Pokemon trainers, they want to do battle to get stronger, and this is all consensual.
Yes, this is a symbiotic relationship.
Okay. I was confused about this even when I was doing Pokemon League and stuff. Nobody had talked to me about Pokemon lore. I was just learning the card game so I could play it with strangers' kids.
Yeah, and also to note is that not all Pokemon are used in combat either. There are plenty of Pokemon that are house pets, and there are plenty who actually do work. Like, there are ones who can haul stuff around. There are ones who provide dairy.
I want to talk about the Pokemon we eat. I really don't want to do it. I don't think that helps your case for this next bit, if I'm going to be honest.
True, because one of the things that stands out about Pokemon Black and White is that they were a kind of soft reboot of the series, and so they tried to explore a bit of deeper themes. And the one that they went with was misguided animal rights activists in the form of Team Plasma, whose goal it is to free all Pokemon from under the control of people. And they are led by a young man who can speak Pokemon language, named N. I mean, okay, he goes by N, but his actual name, and I'm not making this up, is Natural Harmonia Gropius.
That's a mouthful, and odd as can be.
What was that? Natural Harmonica Tropius?
Sure, might as well be. But
excuse me, give me a moment. You're trying to be serial here. Anyway.
Yeah, like, we had to take a small pause anyway, and you missed some of the laughter, but, like, I can't make this up. This is real. And it's so on the nose.
Yeah, his name is very much his cause.
Yeah, and also this is the first Pokemon region to not be set in Japan. This is set in America, and I think that's part of why his name is also like this.
I was just gonna say that nobody said art had to be subtle.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Sonic CD is not subtle.
Yeah,
neither is my game.
Well, that just goes to show that, you know, some forms of appreciation might run into family. Anywho, how your player character meets N is actually witnessing a Team Plasma rally where they're trying to recruit more members. N's father, Getsus, is walking around on stage trying to rally the people and claim, you know, that, like, Pokemon are suffering, you can help them. And N takes interest in you specifically because your starter Pokemon is happy to be with you. Because you actually have some friends, and they're both not taking the best care of their Pokemon, because one of them wants to be the very best like no one ever was, and the other one is just very clumsy and still learning some emotional intelligence.
We've all been there.
We have all been there, so that's why he takes interest in you. And not much comes of this aside from a small battle where he uses Pokemon that can be found in the local area around where you currently are. You do get to encounter him later on a frankly iconic scene where you both ride a Ferris wheel together. There are very few moments in the Pokemon franchise that have romantic tension, but this is one of them. And he pours his heart out to you about his passion and about how you seem to be one of the few people who can understand his perspective and love Pokemon for who they are. And when you turn him down, because of course you turn him down because you're the protagonist, he fights you again, and you don't see him again for a while. Not until he has solidified his passion for the ideals he's striving for so hard that he manages to revive the legendary Pokemon of ideals, Zekrom. This is why Pokemon Black is important, because, Zekrom.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna need more information for that to mean anything to me.
So, yeah, Zekrom is the legendary Pokemon of ideals, and its counterpart is Reshiram, the legendary Pokemon of truth. If you play Pokemon White, he will have Reshiram, who is, again, the Pokemon of truth, and that doesn't match up with his story arc at all, because...
Okay, you were making a big deal about it being Pokemon Black version rather than Pokemon White version because the theme works better, because of which Pokemon he gets to have at the end fits the theme much better than the other side of the series. Because if you don't play Pokemon, when they release the Pokemon games, they release 2 versions at the same time.
So that
for
way,
reasons.
They make some Pokemon exclusive to the game, so you have to trade with other people to complete the Pokedex. It's to encourage people to interact with one another.
Community's always been a part of Pokemon.
Yeah, so that's how they do that, even though at this point with the internet, people are like, yeah, so can we just have one version?
We get enough community with Go, thank you.
Yeah. But, I personally think that there might have actually been some discussion to not actually have there be versions with this one, especially because this is the only Pokemon game in the franchise to get a direct sequel, meaning it could have just been intended to be 2 games instead of 4 games. But
that's business for you.
Yeah, that's also a bit beside the point. So, he manages to get the legendary Pokemon of ideals, and he's going to use this Pokemon to basically take over the region and make people free their Pokemon. And notably, he does this by... Okay, in the Pokemon franchise, there's always, a final boss league. Somehow Team Plasma has constructed an entire castle that surrounds the Pokemon League. This is apparently where N grew up. I don't get it.
Well, I'm completely lost. So just continue.
When you go to this castle to go defeat N, and revive your own legendary Pokemon in the process, because you know N's wrong. You know that people in Pokemon can have their scuffles, but they're getting along just fine. You go to N's childhood home to go beat him up, and you stumble upon his bedroom where his sisters are hanging out, and they tell you that their father abused N and only introduced him to abused Pokemon from birth. And that's how he can speak to Pokemon, and that's why he believes the things that he does. It's all a curated lie to instill this passion in him.
Which is scary. That's a scary idea.
Uh-huh.
That's culty shit.
It is culty shit.
Yeah.
So, with this knowledge, you go and you revive the legendary Pokemon Reshiram, and, you fight him to show him the truth using said Pokemon. When you actually defeat him, N's father gets this, is absolutely furious and tries to kill you. Because he's like, dang it, you ruined my plan to get everybody to give up their Pokemon so I can rule the world. Because I'll be the only one who has Pokemon at that point. And, I just feel like this is such a great look at how these sort of systems get made in the first place. You have people who think that something is a bigger problem than it is, or a different problem than it is, by indoctrination, by curating examples, by all of these things. His plan in the way that it existed only worked because he literally raised someone to be a figurehead. And
what a sad limiting life that is.
Yeah, it really is. And when all's said and done, after all this fighting is over, N just is reeling, but he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go think about this. You've shown me a lot. And, even though you prove him wrong, his legendary still accepts him. This is, the only time in Pokemon history where the antagonist gets to keep their legendary Pokemon. Most of the time, people who get legendary Pokemon, they force them to their bidding, and N did not. And so he goes and sets about creating what he actually thinks the mission should be, where he's going to go and help the Pokemon who are suffering, because there is a problem, because Getsis did find abused Pokemon. There are problems, but it's not black and white.
And we have a title!
Tying into the entire theme of the games, and it's beautiful. And I hate that these games had such a poor reception because they were trying to do something here. And after that backlash, they kind of reeled it in quite a lot and played it a lot more safe for years and years. And I want more of this.
I mean, it's just like right out of the gate, you have, you know, a Pokemon game that's sort of central theme is like, is this core mechanic that the series is based off of what its signature gameplay is it wrong?
Yeah, and I love how they talk about that and talk about some of the pitfalls in their society. I mean, I know in the anime they show a lot more Pokemon being abused than they do in the games, which means it has been like a topic that they've touched on as a franchise before, but this is like the time in the main series where they really talk about it. And I think they did a really good job with it. Even if a lot of it's kind of end-heavy because this is a Pokemon game, almost all Pokemon games have, like, the plot in the last, like, hour of a 30-hour game. It's just the way it is. Yeah, I could keep going on, but I think I've touched on most of it, unless we want to talk about how PETA saw this game.
Oh, goodness.
Because, I mean, okay, Team Plasma is kind of an allegory for organizations that are like PETA, who think they know what's right for animals, and that animals shouldn't be with people. PETA, when the games came out, they made a parody game called Pokemon Black and Blue. You still fight Team Plasma in this game. They are not aware enough to know that they are effectively Team Plasma. And of course it's full of shock and horror gore, and
which is a PETA mainstay, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny to me.
It's not off-brand, though, for them to totally fly off the handle at something and not even... for somebody to take a piece of art that's, questioning their ideals, but not their motivations, and twist it into something and be reactionary about it. That's kind of the whole point of being a fervent organization in the first place, which it's interesting that Pokemon Black's kind of commenting on this and actually got a reaction on the very people that they were trying to not necessarily get a reaction out of, but give commentary on. Social commentary. That's the word I'm looking for. They were trying to do a social commentary on this kind of thing, and lo and behold...
Yeah, it's not the first nor the last time that PETA has taken shots at Nintendo.
Over Pokemon?
Well, I know their latest one was Animal Crossing.
Oh,
like, don't fish in Animal Crossing! It's horrible for the fish!
Oh god. I'm sorry.
Why would you wear leather in your video game? Even though it's actually in lore fake leather because it's Animal Crossing.
Right. Oh, Jesus. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just putting this into the context of the same people who try and say that video games are not art also try to say that video games cause violence. I'm like, how is something incapable of art capable of riling people into violence? It either is something that can evoke emotion and immersion and talk and communicate to you, or it is just a plaything like a set of dice for children. I mean, which is it? I'm like, you can't have it both ways, but they still react like it is. It's like they take this surface level take off it and they think they know what they're talking about, and they react to it and they criticize it without, one, playing it themselves, or watching somebody play it, or talking to somebody who plays it, or anything. It's like they're just so into looking down on video games and video game players and all this. I mean, and, you know, I didn't realize in some ways that this affected me so deeply because I've been a gamer my whole life. And not necessarily good, you know, I've had, you guys know, I've had a lot of hang-ups and had a lot of insecurities and all kinds of stuff. A lot of things I've needed to work through, and this last year playing video games and making podcasts with you guys has been really amazing. A really amazing healing process, and I'm really grateful that we're doing this project together.
Yeah, I am too. There's a lot of fun stuff that has come out of this, and a lot of deep stuff that has come out of this, and I've become closer to you guys as a family.
And it's like, yeah, if you had put me in front of a microphone years ago when I first, played Sonic CD, I would not be talking to you about its, particularly interesting take on its environmental themes.
Sure. But that's the nice thing about art, no matter where it comes from, is that it time travels, right? Art that's actually elevated into universal themes or universal threads, it's going to stand the test of time, or at least be a representation in time of its time and place. Like some stuff needs a context to be understood and some stuff is timeless, right? There's a time and a place for all of those kinds of things. I'm just thinking about, Sackbot and I have been sharing a lot of moments around Pink Floyd lately because I came across something that's made me think about it, and I was really, really into them when I was a teenager. And some of the music and themes and things really moved me when I was a kid, even though I didn't have life experience to back it up. And now that I do, that art speaks to me more than it did then, but it's like I held it in a time capsule in my brain for when I needed it. And then now that it can help me really relate better to situations that I'd been through seeds that were planted before I'd been through it. It's just this weird time travel thing that art can do. And it's just amazing. It's like Sonic CD resonated with you before you even understood what was resonating. That's just the thing, is art will talk to you before you're ready to hear the message. And it'll hold your interest either until it does or until that no longer applies.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we let off with showcases of AAA games, things that a lot of people have played, because if you are an avid gamer, which if you're listening to this you probably are, you have played art. You have most likely played something that you consider elevated art, and I encourage you to appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you need somebody to spout off about it, we have a comment section. And maybe eventually we'll have a community. We'll see how that all plays out. But let us know what you think is art and underappreciated elevation and all that. And she mentioned that right now because my game is super indie. I don't know of anybody else that has played it.
I've definitely seen YouTube videos of it being played.
I'm not saying nobody's played it. I just say I don't know anybody personally who has played it. And the kids have not played it yet. I'm trying to get Sackbot to play it. But anyway, you had something else you wanted to say before I introduce it.
There's a bit of a difference between, the elevated art of AAA games and the elevated art of indie games. Indie games can take so many more risks. So, while the AAA games we've talked about, they do have these impactful messages and talk about these deeper problems affecting society, there's only so much that can happen, for Pokemon, for example, always has to go back to the status quo, so that way, the games can keep being the same in each iteration, and, Robotnik's always going to be causing problems in Sonic.
Yeah.
Even if you create a good future, you didn't stop him forever, you gotta keep fighting him.
Yeah, and all that time travel stuff does actually happen on a small planet, where the entire game is set, so it's past and future are all isolated to one specific spot. It's very much something that disappears at the end of the game so things can go back to normal.
Yeah, so indie games don't have to necessarily worry about a status quo.
They do to a specific extent, and any projects can only sustain a certain amount of disdain or hate or backlash or whatever, so you hope that certain projects actually don't do well, you know what I mean? But they also can take amazing kinds of risks and push envelopes in all kinds of different ways. Yeah, I'm being super vague.
Yeah, why don't you talk about your particular example of what word do I want to use to describe this? Do you have a word you want to use to describe this?
Describe this game in a single word?
Yeah. How about we describe it with trigger warning. This game is full of gore. This game is full of disturbing imagery.
Yeah,
child abuse in more detail than I said.
Yeah, oh gosh, and we've talked about Frambeau and Little Misfortune, in the past, and I do consider those elevated art as well. So, I mean, yeah, this all feels like padded filler in this pot here, and we are doing that a little bit, and this is, I don't know that it needs a trigger warning. The game, it's the discussion, I don't think, just talking vaguely about things isn't going to need necessarily a trigger warning. I'm not going to get into deep details, but the game itself, yes, all kinds of trigger warnings. Not necessarily all the trigger warnings, but lots of them. And it's hilarious to me that I'm not much of a horror buff at all. And I've gone into discussion about this, especially like with Outer Wilds Fear episode. I'm not a horror buff. I'm healing from some of the stuff that makes me averse to horror. I don't think I'm ever going to be a fan of jump scares, that kind of thing. And I don't recall this game having any jump scares. But, anywho, without further ado, I'm not going to completely spoil it, but there may be spoilers for it. If discovering a theme on your own that isn't, like, spelled out for you is stimulating for you, you know, then you might not want to listen to me talk about Happy Game. So, you know, jump to the last chapter. I think we'll only have an outro after this. So, yeah, if you plan on playing Happy Game, then you might not want to listen, because I'm going to explore the theme that a lot of people in the reviews didn't get necessarily, but I got instinctively, like right away, and I think it's beautifully done, and the theme resonates through every single layer of this. And so anyway, Happy Game by Amanita Design Games. They're the people who did like Summer Roast and Machinarium, but those are much more lighthearted than this. But there's a lot of bullying themes in those too, if we're going to be honest. But Happy Game is a point-and-click puzzle game. I guess it's not point-and-click, you do move around. I don't know. It's simplistic, it's not platformer or anything like that. It's a puzzle game without any words. So there's no dialogue at all. It's just a little kid that is in a dream. This is all supposed to be in a dream. And it starts with this warning. A small percentage of people may experience discomfort or seizures when exposed to flashing lights. So please be cautious if you are sensitive to either flashing imagery, blood, or violence. There is rarely anything but that to see in Happy Game. Happy Game also depicts various fantasy characters participating in highly absurd comical violence. You'll often see blood on the floor, best case scenario. Witness the decapitation of adorable bunnies, and much more. No filter. Please note, Happy Game is not a happy game. And
it's named like ironically, right?
That's not really the impression I got from it.
I don't see. It's also incredibly literal, because it is the game of being happy. It is, you're supposed to be playing along with what society hands you. And this is, okay, I'm going to get into this in a, it's hard to conceptualize, you know, because like there is no dialogue. So there isn't like a linear story. There's a, you know, there's a level. You can't jump it back forth. There's a linear progression through the game, but it's not like a linear story. It's really hard to explain. It's definitely an art piece. In fact, you know, it's one of those games that I would say sacrifices gamehood a little bit for the art. Like some people have accused Superliminal of doing. But anyway, I found the puzzles. Well, hell, I'll read you my review. If you take the warning seriously, this game delivers creepy horror aesthetic and a challenging set of puzzles that I personally found solvable with just a break every time I got stuck. So if you like trippy environments and making a child character perform horrific acts to solve puzzles, this game is for you. So that was my take right after I finished it. And then not that long after I finished it, a friend of mine who'd recommended it without actually having played it yet, which is kind of hilarious to me in a way, asked me what my take of it was. And I really had deeper thoughts on it after I'd slept on it a couple times. And to me, it really spoke about the horrors of childhood, about how as a child you often have your own language, you know, you have your own limited window into the world based on what you've experienced, because we're all kind of sheltered as children, and your experience is limited to what your parents allow to happen in your sphere of observation, right? And you believe what they tell you because they are setting the stage for how your brain develops. You learn language and culture and everything from either your parents directly or from the environments that your parents allow you to be in. So whether or not they do a good job preparing you for what you're going to be exposed to, your life could be heaven or your life could be hell. And for some people, they don't do a very good job of understanding you or preparing you for the very situations that they're going to put you in. And I think this game demonstrates that. And as I was trying to describe the game to her, a line from a Blink-182 song kept popping in my head. You know, it's just, I'm just a kid and my life is a nightmare. That's... So the kid wakes up and kind of gets out of bed and falls into an environment. And in each act of the game, there's like several levels and then different acts. And in each act, the kid's going to be chasing a specific something that means something to them. I'd say toy because most of them are toys, but at the end, the last act, it's a dog. And I don't want to call a dog a toy.
No.
Even though there's kind of the thread where the parent does kind of, I mean, I'm going to call them the parent, does treat the dog just like the toys. Like, it doesn't matter at all. So, for me, when I was playing the game, there's, at some point in all the acts, not necessarily every level, a big face will appear that's just disembodied head with a really big, like, neon smile on it, right?
I believe I've seen this thing, because, like, a lot of people use the most iconic imagery for, like, their thumbnails. So,
right.
Like...
Right, and so that image, to me, in the game, symbolizes or represents either adults in general or the parents. Anyway, they're the ones just smiling at you, but not really communicating with you. And then the game lets you run around until all of a sudden you're stuck. And then you have to kind of click around and try and figure out what the game wants you to do. And then solve usually a pretty easily solvable puzzle once you figure out what the mechanics are of the particular environment you're in at the moment. And it's different on every level what things you're going to be able to interact with. Although grabbing onto limbs and pulling them to see if they stretch, it's a big theme. There's a lot of body horror in this game. You literally will have to tear things apart. I'll get to that in a minute. But the thing is that in the reviews, people complain about, it's like, the puzzles are awful because you're just clicking around. I'm like, yeah, but if you look at the mechanics under the umbrella of the theme, how often do you feel lost when you're a child? Just stuck in an environment, or actually I experienced this in jobs too, where they just like hand you an assignment, don't tell you how to do it, and just wait for you to meet expectations. Usually under scrutiny, right? Yeah. You're being watched and maybe micromanaged to try and do something that they're not communicating with you about how to do it. And I felt that a lot playing this game. It's like, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? Okay, so then you're asked to solve a puzzle, right? Before the screen will move on and you can progress to the next horror. What's this new torture, right? So the things that the child is asked to do is usually harm someone else. The thing is that the world agrees with the parents. Like, the things that you're tearing to pieces usually smile at you while you do it. The kid will be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to participate in this. But they'll be forced to because the game will not progress unless you do it. And then when you do, usually it's almost like the creatures that you are distorting or ripping their heads off or whatever are thanking you for it. And it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Why is my parental figure or God or whoever asking me to hurt other creatures and the creatures like it? How? I don't fit into this world, right? And the theme comes up a lot, feeling like, oh my gosh, that and the things that the kids chasing through these levels are regularly taken away or hidden and, used to motivate them through these environments that the kid would not want to go through. And you're given no choice but to do these things. The game will not progress. The whole puzzle will be based in doing something probably horrific to another entity that appears sentient, right? It has a face, it smiles at you, it waves its arms and relatively communicates, but they're all smiling. It's like, is this what happiness is? I don't think I like it, because I was just happy bouncing my ball and playing in my room, and now I'm asked to do all these horrific things that I don't understand while you smile at me. While I'm doing this for your approval? Is that what I want? I just wanted my ball. I just wanted my blocks. I just wanted my dog. I don't want any of this. And, it's like,
I don't want any more ketchup.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't want any more ketchup either. Oh yeah, just the mechanic of not knowing what to do plays directly into the theme. And so The environments that you're in, at least at the beginning of almost every level, will be deceptively cute sometimes. Especially the circle levels. The circle levels are really cute. I think they're incredibly innovative. I was informed later that there's a lot of games that have circular levels, so...
Okay, well, but not like this one.
Okay.
I have not seen many like this one. I have seen circular, like, playing fields, but not in this sort of way.
You're running around the inside of a sphere, but it's 2D.
Yeah, and also the fact that the camera still centers on you, because there are ones that I have played where the camera does not center on you, and they are the most disorienting shit. You do not move left and right, you move clockwise and counterclockwise.
Yeah, no. And this one, I won't say it falls into the game is your friend kind of territory, because that being lost and not knowing what to do and just having to click on stuff until you find something that works is part of the mechanics, and I think that's on purpose. I think that frustration is built into the game to elicit this feeling in you, to emphasize how powerless childhood makes you, and how disconcerting the motivations and the goals, adult goals. You know, you're set on tasks to meet adult goals that do not make any sense from a child point of view at all. And I'm not going to say any of these levels are direct metaphors for specific things in life that kids might be asked to do, but they might be. I'm not looking into that deeply. I played it again recently, but I didn't sit down and take notes level by level. But if somebody else did, they may discover that there's a lot more even nuance to this than even I discovered. But the music sometimes, especially at the beginning of each act, is often kind of whimsical, and a lot of it lures you into this false sense of security. I'm just a kid following a bouncy ball. Do 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 do. You want me to what? You. The puzzle is I have to decapitate something. Oh, everyone, not just everyone.
I know you can't put them back together, right?
I don't know, they put me back together after pulling my head off a few times, because that happens too. In fact, one of the mechanics is, at least one point in each act, the child will have to wear a different head. The child will not be allowed to be themselves. They will have to be somebody else to finish. And the whole time, I'm looking at the Steam page right now, and occasionally this image of what I'm calling the parent. They don't have names. There is no dialogue in this at all. Is looking down on the child. And I think the spotlight kind of represents, because there's spotlights a lot of times in a lot of the darker levels, and it kind of does represent scrutiny. So anyway, that's my kind of take on Happy Game. I don't want to spoil the ending. And
whoa, the game ends?
Oh, thank God.
And I gotta tell you that I thought the puzzles were actually really innovative. I thought there should only be so many ways you can harm other creatures and things. I was like, no, you can be really creative about that. And
yeah,
each level is a really different theme. I mean, act. I separate it because you have level, when you're all done, you can have level select. And I thought that each act was going to be a level, and I was wrong. There's more than one level in an act kind of location kind of thing. So I don't know. It's difficult to really communicate about the nuances of something that doesn't use any dialogue in this way. But yeah, each one will have its own theme.
Just thinking about those reviews of say that oh, you just click around. I saw you mess around a little bit with a level. You showed me one, and how you can mess around and stuff happens. There are quite a few abstract-ish puzzle games where you just click on stuff and sometimes stuff happens. A lot of the time those are facets of little kids puzzle games where you have just things you can make happen in that kind of way. And often, because they're whimsical and cute, they're praised for it, It's funny how the turntables, huh?
I don't know. I could understand people who are not going to have an artistic appreciation of this game, thinking it either one is a little short, two, the puzzles seem simplistic once you figure out what the puzzle is, without valuing the searching for the puzzle being part of the game. And a lot of people are not going to have an appreciation for that mechanic. I was frustrated by it too a few times as well, but now I'm looking at it going, I think that frustration was an artistic choice, and I'm going to put that in the elevation category. You know what I mean? It's one of the things that makes me think this game is art. Is that utilization of mechanics that indie games are often empowered to do, like you were talking about in your introduction to this segment. That is one of the things that I think indie games do better a lot than AAA games. AAA games need almost anyone to be able to sit down and kind of understand how to play without much of an introduction, and indie games can play with mechanics in ways that even seasoned puzzle gamers like myself might not be ready for. And then this isn't an example I would use for that, but I'm open to that experience when it comes up. You know what I mean? I'm open to being confused and to recognizing confusion as something they were also going for, as confusion adding artistic emphasis to a mechanic, that kind of thing. I don't know. I feel like I'm half talking in circles, but it's like...
just like the game! It's walking in circles!
Well, just those levels, just the circle levels. The rest of them are very linear. You're going from left to right. The game is scrolling for the most part. But, yeah, I absolutely recommend the game if horror aesthetics and participating in horrific acts in video games is not going to bother you. Gore is not going to bother you. That kind of thing. So, that might be a pretty tall order for a lot of people. And I don't remember the flashing lights, but I'm sure there's a couple scenes with lightning in them, so if that's enough for you. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were a couple strobe effect things that I didn't notice, because I am not susceptible that way, I'm not sensitive that way, so yeah. Meanwhile, if you wanted this game, if you thought this game was going to be whimsical, and it is whimsical, but if you thought it was going to be cutesy and not violent, you're wrong. It is very violent, but I think it's doing all of it with a point. And, it's not a very expensive game. It's not a long game. So if you wanted to kind of see what elevated art can be in a puzzle game where the puzzles are not going to break your brain, but the setting, environment, and the thematic elements all combined together, really, I think it's an amazing art piece. And I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm. So... we're winding down now, kind of, right?
Oh, yeah. That's pretty much all I needed to say about Happy Game, at least for right now. I mean, if somebody wanted to do a play-by-play or whatever at some point, I'd probably want to do that live-streamed. I don't think I'd want to do it essay form, even.
Yeah. I think you're right, though, that we should list out these games, even if we don't have time to tell you why we consider them art. I think acknowledging how we feel about them is important.
Okay. Okay.
If you will allow me a moment to read them out loud. Outer Wilds. The Witness, Grotto, Mutazone, A Day of Maintenance, Franbeau, The Stanley Parable, Manifold Garden, The Last Campfire, Celeste, Some Distant Memory, Superliminal, Broken Age, The Beginner's Guide, Hollow Knight, Papers, Please, Hypnospace Outlaw, The Looker, Night in the Woods, Undertale, Super Hot? Inscription, The Hex, Pokemon Black, Bastion, Heaven's Vault, Little Misfortune, Happy Game, Roki, What Remains of Edith Finch. This is a non-exhaustive list.
I don't even think we remember to put Franbeau on there.
Franbeau is number 6 on that list.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we'd better remember Franbeau.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
My brain buzzes about Franbeau frequently, actually.
Yeah. Here, let me
Yeah, absolutely non-exhaustive list. We all of a sudden go like, oh my gosh, we need to add that one to the list. So
yeah,
we have several different lists, spreadsheets that we are just keeping track of some stuff that's going to lead to some interesting projects in Season 2. So our next episode is going to be a wrap-up of the year and a wrap-up of the season. We're planning on just continuing on through December and January. And even though last year's we started in February, Season 2 is going to start right at the end of the year.
And we're going to talk about games that we've played that led to the creation of this podcast, like all these games we played together up until this point, and we're also going to talk about games in general we played this year.
And just in general recommendations, and maybe our top tier game lists. We haven't really decided how it's all going to wrap up, but next episode's going to be our wrap-up episode.
How much of it do you think is going to be Tears of the Kingdom?
As much as you want, considering it's our project and you can do whatever you want.
Whoa!
But I have a lot more to talk about than just Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom, like...
Yeah, I have at least one other game.
Yeah, at least one other game.
Yeah, it's not like I watched you 100% any games in the living room anytime recently.
Yeah, definitely not even going so far as to 101% anything.
That's kind of a hint, isn't it?
Maybe.
How many games do you 101%?
That's right, next episode I'm going to be talking about Donkey Kong Country. No.
I didn't know you've played.
I haven't.
And I didn't know it came out this year, either.
We're talking about stuff that came out this year? I mean,
Well,
I haven't played
something.
many games that came out this year, as I found out doing the Steam Awards. I'm
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I thought I'd played more games that came out this year than that.
I was lucky to have 3 games that were eligible for nominations.
I had...
Yeah.
Did I even have 3? It might have only... Oh, yeah, I did have 3. And one of them was a free game. 2 of them I had gotten in... Or had all of them I'd gotten within a month?
I don't know. Anyway, we're going to be talking about all sorts of those games next week. And it might be another long...
Next episode, not next week.
Oh my god, next episode. It might be another long one. Because there's a lot of games and a lot of love.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of ground to cover because I think we're gonna...
This is 2 years worth of games.
Yeah, it's 2 years worth of gaming together, and so we'll see how that all plays out. We look forward to you joining us. Please give us feedback on the episode. Let us know games that you think are art or that are underrated for their theming or for just aesthetics or just soundtrack or whatever.
And, like, here's one that I haven't been able to really explore much of. If you have ever played a multiplayer game that you consider art, please tell me about it.
Oh, yeah. We would love to hear more about all that stuff. So, yes, bring on your art. Recommend your art games to us. We've given you some examples of AAA stuff and indie stuff. And, you know, if you've followed us at all, you know we play a lot of indie games. But we're not opposed to AAA stuff. It just, you know, we do have our styles and we do have our themes and we do have our technical limitations. But, anyway... We're working on a lot of those. So, anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you. I am Giggleklutz.
I'm Honeyshuckleex.
And I'm Sackbot Barbecue.
This has been Collab Not Multiplayer. Goodbye.
Bye!
Bye.